When my parents sold our old house, the only thing I really wanted to keep was this one dusty cardboard box. It wasn't filled with valuables or heirlooms, just my childhood drawings. You know the kind, stick figures with mismatched limbs, brightly colored crayon monsters with too many teeth, a house with a ridiculous number of windows. Just normal, innocent kid stuff. I thought it would be a cool, quirky thing to do, so I framed a few of the best ones and hung them in the hallway of my new apartment. They looked kind of neat, a splash of nostalgic color against the plain white walls. I smiled, remembering the little kid who drew them, and went to bed, not thinking anything more of it. That first night was when it started. At exactly 12:47 a.m., I was woken up by this faint, soft scratching sound. It was barely there, almost like a mouse in the walls, but it had this weird dry texture to it, like a crayon being dragged across paper. I told myself I was just hearing things, my brain still adjusting to the new apartment's noises, but curiosity got the better of me. I crept out of bed and into the hallway. My heart did a little flutter. One of the drawings had changed. It was the one of my stick figure family, the classic mom, dad, and me holding hands, but now, there was someone else. A new figure, standing just behind us. It was tall, unnaturally so, with long, spindly limbs, and it had no face, just a blank crayon oval. I stared at it for a long time, trying to make sense of it. I must have just not noticed it before. Yeah, that had to be it. I was tired, stressed from the move. Sleep deprivation can do weird things to your memory. I laughed it off, a little nervously, and went back to bed, pulling the covers up a little tighter than usual. The second night, the sound came again. Same time, 12:47 a.m., but this time it was louder, more insistent. A frantic, scratching noise that made the hair on my arms stand up. I didn't want to look. A part of me screamed not to get out of bed, to just hide under the blankets until morning. But I couldn't ignore it. I had to know. I tiptoed into the hallway, my phone's flashlight beam shaking in my hand. Another drawing had changed. This one was a monster I'd drawn when I was 6, a big purple blob with green horns and a silly jagged smile. Except it wasn't silly anymore. The monster was closer to the edge of the paper now, as if it had taken a step forward. Its crayon eyes, which had been simple black dots, were darker, sharper, filled with a kind of detail a 6-year-old could never draw. They seemed to be staring right at me. My blood ran cold. This wasn't my imagination. Something was happening. That's when I decided I needed proof. I couldn't just tell someone my drawings were changing, they'd think I was crazy. So, the third night, I set up my phone on a small table in the hallway, aimed directly at the gallery of framed drawings. I started recording right before I went to bed, determined to catch whatever was going on. I barely slept, tossing and turning, my ears straining for that sound. And then, right on schedule, 12:47 a.m. hit. The scratching started, loud and clear from the hallway. This time, I didn't move. I just lay in bed, my heart pounding against my ribs, and waited for morning. The next day, my hands trembled as I picked up my phone. I scrolled to the video file and hit play. For hours, the footage was just a still, silent shot of my hallway wall. It was boring. I fast-forwarded, my thumb hovering over the progress bar. I stopped it right at 12:47 a.m., and watched my breath caught in my throat. It was happening. On the screen, the drawings were moving. It was slow, almost imperceptible, at first, like a time-lapse of a flower blooming, but terrifying. The stick figures were slowly shifting their positions. Their crayon limbs were bending at impossible angles. The smiles on their faces stretched, growing wider and wider until they touched the edges of the paper, grotesque and unnatural. Then, the little stick figure child in the family portrait, the one that was supposed to be me, slowly turned its head. Its simple dot eyes looked directly into the camera lens, and then it waved a small, jerky crayon wave. I dropped my phone. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. That night, I didn't even try to sleep. I sat in my living room with all the lights on, staring at the dark doorway to the hall. I didn't set up a camera. I didn't want any more proof. I just wanted it to stop. But the quiet was somehow worse. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. Then, just as I was starting to think maybe, just maybe, it was over, I heard something new. Not a scratching, a whisper, a dry, rustling whisper, like dead leaves skittering across pavement. It was coming from the hallway, and it was whispering my name. My whole body went rigid with fear. I forced myself to my feet, my legs feeling like lead. I had to see. When I looked into the hallway, I saw it. There was a new drawing on the wall, one I had never seen before, one I know for a fact I never drew. It was tacked right in the middle of all the others. The paper was fresh, the crayon marks vivid. It was a drawing of my bedroom, my current bedroom, and in the bed was a figure, sleeping me. But floating above my drawn, sleeping body were words, scrawled in messy, childish, red crayon. It said, "You used to see us." That was it, I snapped. In a blind panic, I ripped every single drawing off the wall. I didn't care about the frames, the glass shattering on the floor. I tore the paper into tiny pieces, my hands shaking violently. I gathered up all the shredded paper and broken frames and threw them into the big dumpster behind my apartment building. I watched them disappear into the darkness, and for the first time in days, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The scratching stopped that night. The whispering was gone. I actually slept. It was finally over. The relief lasted for one single, blissful night. This morning, I woke up and stretched, feeling more rested than I had in a week. As my eyes adjusted to the morning light filtering into my room, I saw something on the wall next to my bed. My stomach dropped. There, on the plaster, were fresh crayon marks. A waxy black stick figure was drawn right on the wall, standing beside my bed. It was tall, with long, spindly limbs, and it was smiling. Thanks for watching. If you have your own scary story, share it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more. Stay safe out there.